Good afternoon, gentlemen. I wanted to make a couple of videos here. Really, I wanted to make one video, but it would be way too long if it were one video. But I am an extremely opinionated person. People say that I'm arrogant, even. And they tend to come into voice chat with me and they're like, oh, you're actually not completely insane. Uh, yes, correct. So the idea here is that I'm going to make a couple of videos. The first one is just going to go through and explain my history with the hobby of RPGs, tabletop games. And then I'll have a second video about my sort of intellectual development around the hobby, like perspective on what the game is and whatever, and the people around it and the hobby itself. So this first one is just literally just the facts. Here's how it all got started. So I have this list that I'm going to have to follow in order to make any heads or tails of this. So in I was not into the game at all for most of my life. In fact, in high school, we played once. We played third edition one time. So first, it's probably helpful to understand. I'm mid-30s. I grew up with the Nintendo, I guess, and just caught the tail end of pre-internet life. So going bicycling around the neighborhood, playing with the neighborhood kids, playing in the woods. Did a ton of that when I was young. Uh, there was certainly a lot of video games. I mean, we had the sleepovers, N64 sleepovers, that kind of thing. Playing 2v2, 1v1, 4v4, FFA. I mean, that sort of thing. But D&D wasn't really a part of that. And I know there were people who played third edition, but I thought well, I didn't have any thoughts about it because there was no D&D people in my high school. Nobody played it. We were the nerdiest people in my high school, and we didn't play. We played Halo on the Xbox. So there was one time where I learned enough about third edition to run it for my a couple of friends of mine and like my sister, I think, um, and they didn't get it. They each had their own character, and I had come up with a scenario, a wizard's tower that they were going to explore and go through, and they kept trying to think like, well, we need to meet this wizard because that's Jay's character. We need to meet his character, get him in the game, and like they didn't get it, like they didn't really understand what the type of the game was, and I had never run this before. I'm sure I was doing a terrible job, but that was it. That's my only primary experience with any kind of RPG until 2013 for the most part. So in like the 2004 to 2010, for me, that's like the MMO era. Playing World of Warcraft. Never played EverQuest. Never really played any other MMOs. But the MMO thing is important because it's very similar, I feel, to the RPG tabletop stuff. A lot of the same social stuff comes up in terms of like having a guild, uh, the personality conflicts that happen, um, just scheduling stuff, getting people scheduled at the same time, and then a lot of the stuff in game ends up being similar. Like we need somebody to play a paladin, we need somebody to play a cleric, we need somebody to play a magic user, whatever. Those are the same things that happen in an MMO. You get those same problems. And there's a lot of social contract stuff around that, which I'll ultimately get into in terms of the a second video about like henchmen and just like all the social contract stuff. And it does feel weird to come into the online space. I will say where there's the push for old school style play, but a lot of the things that people consider like old school are just like completely invalid social arrangements that could never work. And if you've played MMOs, like, okay, in order to make the social dynamics work, we have to do it like this. So coming into the old school and seeing some of these like attempts to like re-implement social dynamics that don't work is really funny. But whatever. Uh, that's something that kind of sets up some of my expectations. And I guess I will point out later down the line, there's my primary home group, people who used to live here but they've since moved wherever. They are all ex MMO players, so they get like the tropes like of the genre of like fantasy RPG. So a lot of the stuff, some of the things in the MMO world that would change over time were things that were just like really like piddly little logistics crap that got taken out of the game because it literally wasn't doing anything. It was just wasting everyone's time. and obviously to some extent you get to a certain point where that you've taken away too much, or maybe you're taking away things that weren't actually bad. Uh, but it's again funny. Another thing in the old school space where you have people advocating for just stuff that's terrible, and like anyone with an IQ above room temperature is not going to be fooled. Like they're not going to like tracking fucking arrows kind of thing. Like, come on, man. Let's be serious here. We're not fucking retarded children. Like nobody's going to be fooled by this. Um, anyway, my actual then start in the hobby is 2013. I go to Gen Con. I was invited there by a big group of friends, and the one guy's dad is all excited about a game called Numenera. So that was like my first RPG that I played in terms of the tabletop space. I bought the books. He ran a session. It was great. I had a lot of fun. I bought the books. I played it a bunch. I ran it for a bunch of friends. Um, I also got into the odd, I think, for free. I got some Lamentation stuff because it was recommended to me. And that stuff was really weird. That put me down reading all kinds of weird OSR stuff, reading the old Your Dungeon is Suck blog. Ultimately, that brings me to reading stuff like Prince's review blog and various other OSR bloggers and like their opinions. So I'm like absorbing all that stuff in that time period. And then the following year in 2014, 5th edition D&D comes out. And Horde of the Dragon Queen is a terrible module, but nonetheless, that was a perfect time to go to a game store and play because in the game stores, I had tried. This is something I skipped over, but I had tried to play Pathfinder a few times at the game stores, and it was terrible. The people playing Pathfinder were really weird, fucked up people, and it was just a terrible experience. But when 5th edition came out, for that first couple of years, you could go to the game store when the game was brand new, and the other people in the game store were normal. They were normal human beings that you would actually want to know outside of the game, and wouldn't just put up with. They were bathed. They bathed. So I met a bunch of people who I still talk to today, different friends, uh, who are in some of these other groups that I'm going to talk about down the line. Some of those guys were 3rd edition players, and then had come back to the game for 5e. But that was 2014, and then 2015. I did run. Uh, we ran some 5th edition stuff. It didn't really work out all that well. I did end up running Tomb of Horrors, the original AD&D Tomb of Horrors, using 5th edition, which was pretty good. The players tore through that thing like butter. They were so good at the game. It's really bizarre to play with people in the online space and how bad they are at just playing the game at all. Like the 3rd edition players really knew what they were doing. Like they could get into the mind space of playing the game. And while I was on vacation, we hooked up with some friends of mine in California. We sat in a hotel room one weekend and played Shadows of the Last War Eberron for like 2 days straight. That was cool. So that was a good memory that I have of playing the game. But after that, 5e wasn't really working. It's the whole character building thing and like the game. There were a lot of struggles, and it wasn't a lot. It was increasingly not fun. I started reading more OSR stuff, having been introduced with the Lamentations. But from like 2016 to 2020 to 2016 to 2020, I was pretty much out of the hobby. Other than I still had these blogs in my RSS reader that I was looking at, so I was reading all that. Maybe occasionally playing a 5th edition game or running Lamentation stuff in 5th edition, but it wasn't really until 2021. I had been reading Prince's blog for a long time, and he mentioned Aaron's Discord, the Pedantic Discord server, and so I went in there, and that got me between that and like the whole No Art Punk 1 concept. I started working on Vault of the Warlord for OD&D, and I ran that for my home group that I previously mentioned, which was 3 or 4 players who used to live around here, but they don't anymore. And actually, you know what? I've completely forgotten about something because I actually ran a final 5th edition game just before that in like 2020, maybe, or maybe early 2021. I'm not sure. I didn't check into that. So I was starting to get back into the game around, I guess, the COVID time, which is weird because I remember doing a shit ton of Sudoku during that time as well. But anyway, the whole OD&D thing with the home group, I started, I started on literally the little brown books, nothing else. So as I'm gradually pulling in more rules, and I don't want to actually show the old books to my players because this looks like crap. So I start writing up the rules as far as how I'm running the game into this main book. And this is going on for a while before I even decide to say, well, this is going to be called something. This is my own game now. This is Ransack. So that took a while of building it up. And I'm really happy with how that has gradually turned out and just been rolling along for the past few years because it's purely built off of playing games. People are sometimes looking at me like, "Oh, you're trying to get famous." Blah, 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 blah. It's like, please blow your brains out, you dumb fuck. I do not give a shit about that. Seriously, my entire involvement in the online space is because I have met cool people who are interested in what I'm doing, and they talk to me about it. And several of them are now running the system. But if it came down to it, like I would walk away from all this. Like I don't really care. Like I have my home group. I have some real life groups. I don't need to sell any of this, or like I don't have like an ego about any of it. It's just a game. I mean, there's some reasons that I am capable of doing this due to my career, which I guess I didn't really get into. But maybe I'll talk about it at the end of the video about why I'm good at this. And maybe I'll do it in the next video. I don't know. But that's kind of how things are getting started here. And then in Pedantic, I had an initial online group as well for people in Pedantic running Vault again, which was a lot of old guys who aren't really playing anymore, and a few other people. Mostly that initial, like, what would you call it, like a prequel season of play, because I've been kind of going in like this yearly pattern of playing like it feels like a television season the way we've been playing. And that's like the prequel season because most of the people who were in the prequel season have moved on. They're not even in Pedantic anymore, or they're not playing for one reason or another. There's a couple of guys who play every once in a while, but they're not big online guys as much. So, is what it is. But the following year, 2022, is where things really kick off because now I've got the actual proper online game going. It's I started off with a mega dungeon, which was had some issues. This was all very new to me, but I'm exploring and trying new stuff, and I'm still doing that even today, just trying as much new stuff as I can. There was the Florida group, one of my buddies, one of my best friends, playing in the Florida. He's running the system in Florida. I wrote Keep the Pace, which was submitted to NAP2, and got hammered because, it's not. It's not fantasy. I mean, a lot of people loved it. Like, a lot of people loved it. They had a really great time playing it because it was like a challenge module, but it didn't, in terms of the contest, I would have benefited from more aesthetic flavor to have any chance of appealing to the judgment of Prince, which is all fine. That was actually another thing that I didn't mention, but the Vault of the Warlord module was reviewed by Bryce as well. And Milan. Milan was more favorable. Bryce had very specific nitpicks, which frankly I knew myself already. So I can't really complain about them. It does concern me. I do wonder if I ever make anything else that is reviewed by Bryce, if he will give any kind of feedback that's not just surface level that I haven't already thought of myself. We'll see. People are pretty hard on Bryce. I kind of like the idea of being hard on Bryce, but whatever. It's fine. I can't say his feedback was bad by any means. It was legitimate. It was correct. So with 2022, full swing there, really getting into playing the online group going. We do the mega dungeon. We by the end of the year, we've got a big war going on in the campaign hex map. The hex map hasn't really been used much as like an actual play space. It's been more just to say here's where the adventures are happening. So I haven't really fully graduated into like that big hex map campaign play style yet. That's something I would like to do in the future. In 2023, there's North Texas RPG Con. There is the Wednesday night OSE group. I really should say about the con, we had probably, I don't know, somewhere between 10 and 20 people who met up. And there were a bunch of games that got played. Very informative. And, meeting people is always cool. The Wednesday group, the OSC group, that started there. We were originally playing in a whole bunch of different game stores, and we had various people who were kind of weird. Ultimately, we got that around to the one specific game store, and there's been a pretty consistent group at this point. Now, I was not DMing that originally. I am mostly DMing it now. There are a couple other people who DM. I don't know that the current group who plays in that store is like OSC doesn't really work for them. They're most like some of the players are 5e players. I've talked about this a bunch, but they're asking me to run Dune now, which I think I will do. I think I will try that, even though it's Modifius, and I don't really have a lot of faith in the 2d20 system or anything Modifius does. But whatever, I'm gonna try it. So that's something. I started running the church group, so to speak, that year. Originally, my friend, a friend of mine who from the 5e days, former 3rd edition player, he was going to run. He's the artist. He drew the cover for Vault. He did the Ransack character sheet. He did run the Village of Hamlet, mostly. We didn't quite finish it, but ultimately we switched over to having me run the games and running Castles and Tillin for the most part. We've run a few other little things here and there, but that's been going strong and well. We don't play all that often, maybe every couple of months or every month, give or take. So those characters are like level 5-ish. The main online game has been going for a while, and by the time of 2024, those characters are like level. Well, there's a 12th level cleric after about 2 years or a year-ish of play, maybe a year and a half. Some of the players are like 2 years. They've switched out characters here and there because of deaths, or one of the characters is damned to hell, kind of thing. But they're in that like 8 to 9, so we're kind of getting into that like higher level type stuff. I do think the magic item distribution that I've given out is pretty favorable to the point where those characters are, comparatively to a typical AD&D module that I see, like they're more than capable of tackling level 14 or 15 modules, and so we do that. Like we've occasionally run modules intended for level 14 or whatever, and the players are able to take it on. Now, I do think the AD&D modules are sometimes too easy. Now, I do sometimes make them even easier when there are certain encounters that I feel are out of whack, but for the most part, we are pretty much getting into that high-level play. The characters show up with these massive lists of spells and items and wands with charges, all kinds of stuff. The fighters all have magic swords, intelligent swords, daily abilities. They have magic boots and gloves and hats and all this kinds of stuff. So it's all pretty intense. There was some other stuff that happened in 2023. I started doing the random dungeons, which was literally I built my own random dungeon generator, originally similar to the AD&D one, but I started building it out with more and more stuff that isn't included in AD&D, or took the lists and made them longer. And it's not the dungeon maps, it's the dungeon contents. So the idea would be that I would prepare a map ahead of time, and then I would randomly generate the doors, the rooms, monsters, the treasure, etc. as the game is played. Now, over time, I started doing more and more preparatory work ahead of time when running that, but the initial experience of that really felt like this is what the game was in 1972 or 1973. Before D&D was released, this is the game that Gary Gygax was running. The pure, like, no aesthetics at all, just the dungeon, just random generation. This is it. This is the real game. This is like the bare bones, basic skeleton of the game, where the math just works. And that's what you're focused on. Now, I don't think that's fun forever. That's fun for like a little period of time. But, you can't. I do think that building off of that skeletal framework and then using that to make more interesting and complicated stuff where the aesthetics do matter. So, for example, now it's not just random dungeon rooms. Now it's a temple, and things have the Gygaxian naturalism or whatever. And there are hooks to things where, like, these characters, there's a faction and they're in multiple places and you can meet people, whatever. All that more layered on stuff where it becomes a proper campaign is cool and good. But it is very interesting and important to me, the idea of having the basic framework, the basic mathematical framework, functional. Another thing that happened in 2023 was Owlbear completely shitting the bed. So, and Dungeon Sprawl also kind of shit the bed with their new version. So I started working on my virtual tabletop, Ultimate VT. And this is another thing that gets the same kind of reaction as the Ransack book, which is people react and they go, why the fuck are you making another VTT? There's already so many. And like Foundry is an open system. Like anybody can add on to it. Why don't you just, whatever you're going to make, just write it as a Foundry add-on instead? I don't want to do that. And this kind of gets into my career that I didn't talk about. I'm a software developer by trade, have been heavily involved in like architecting a lot of big systems. So system design is like my thing. I know I'm like really good at it and like all the pitfalls and like everything. Uh, you know, I don't really want that kind of open system thing. That's another thing back from the MMO days, like having all the add-ons for WoW. People would like have all these add-ons in their UI and they couldn't play the game without them. I would play the game without any of them. Trounce the shit out of everyone in stats. And then when a new patch would come out, I didn't have to do any work because I didn't have any add-ons that now needed to go get upgraded. And you see the same shit with Foundry where it's like, okay, a new version comes out, we have to update everything. So you're in this rough position. I've always been very opposed to the idea of putting my energy into somebody else's thing. So, however cool, like all the boondoggles in Foundry can be, it makes me really nervous to put energy into something that I don't control and could be taken away from me at any moment, which could happen to the Foundry guys. I wouldn't really expect it to happen. And I think some of the stuff that people are doing is very cool. Like all the automation, that stuff's awesome. I would like to get to that point for myself, but I don't want to get involved in that. And another thing there that makes me nervous is just the idea of I still run a lot of games in person, and I really don't want to get in the habit of being like addicted to the online where I need the tools. Like I don't remember the rules of the game anymore because the tools are automating everything for me. I don't want to get into that position. I don't like running games that don't feel the same as the in-person games. So I try to so with my VTT, the way I'm building it out is to make it as simple as possible. So it's super easy. You throw somebody a link, they're in the game immediately. They can drag an image in, they got a token, boom, we're off to the races. There's none of that sitting around for hours and hours and hours ahead of time preparing, the walls, preparing the maps, preparing the tokens, preparing the rules, preparing the spells, hassling the players to get all their stuff in there. I don't want that. If you do that, that's cool. I'm not hassling you about it, but I'm not into it. If you run a game, like I joined a game that was playing with those tools a couple of different times, I'm totally willing to do my part and enter my information and make it work. But it's not how I want to run my games. So everything that I do in terms of the rules, all the books that I'm writing, all the adventure modules that I'm writing, and there's going to be a lot. Oh, wow, there's a lot. But we'll get there. And the VTT, that's all just it's driven by actual needs in actual play. And if no one ever uses it but me, that's totally cool. People are literally already using it, so, cool. What do you want from me? It's not my... Anyway, that's 2023. We're not even into 2024 yet, but there's only 6 months into the year. Well, we're 5 months into the year. So my goals for this year have been to play and run 100 games. Originally, that was one number. It split into two numbers, so now I'm trying to run 100 games this year and play 100 games this year. One thing that's helping with that is the Tuesday night group, which split off from the Wednesday night game group. So now I run in-person games on Tuesdays, which is to some extent there's another guy who runs OSE on those nights. I am also running Ransack on occasion, depending on the month or the week, whatever. So that's been cool. That's been fun. We got some nice printed copies of the books that I've posted out there. And that's pretty much bringing us up to today and my history with the game. I'm going to make a second video where I talk about my thoughts about the game and how the game is played and et cetera, and kind of a state of the hobby kind of thing. But that covers the basic facts. And this video is going to be like 30 minutes long. That's fine. Is there anything else that I want to mention? In 2022 and 2023, I was running a freaking ton of games. There were weeks where I would run 4 games a week in the evenings. And part of the reason this has all been possible is because I've been I've had health issues. I can't sleep properly. I choke to death in the night, and I gotta have this fucking machine to force me to breathe, and I don't get it. And I've gained a ton of weight too. I'm like, I used to be like 165, and I'm up at 205, which sucks. It really sucks. I guess that's another thing we could get into. I guess we'll just talk about this now. I have two parents. They are normal people. I had a great childhood, which I talked about a little bit before. I have a sister who's pretty into gaming in the girly way. I've always had a lot of friends in life, socially. Got along at work, great. Everything's fine. Um, these health issues have sucked. Uh, in the Ransack book, I have the three columns, which are in the special thanks section. The middle column is just people from real life. So there's a fair number of people involved, uh, both in real life and in online. I don't know. I'm really good at my job. System design type stuff, which being able to take feedback, I guess, and like iterate on something to see what works is really cool. That's a big part of it. I don't know. There's more. I think that's probably good enough. I mean, I could just brag and say that I'm really smart, and I'm probably way smarter than anyone that you've ever met before. But like, there are a lot of other very smart people in the hobby. It's interesting because it does seem odd sometimes, where like all the smart people can like notice each other and like, yes, you're also intelligent. And then you have other people who think they're smart, and it's like, you're not that smart. What are you talking about? Why are you trying to give your opinion? You don't have good opinions. Don't give them. Um, I don't know. That's all very braggadocio, whatever. I feel like I've ruined the video now by putting that on the end, but I don't care. Uh, well, anyway, we'll just leave it at that. I will make a second part where I talk about my intellectual development as far as the game goes, which will be things about like how starting with OD&D and going into AD&D, talking about the fake concept that comes up a lot, talking about depth and complexity again, talking about the 5e players, like, are they having fun? Are they not having fun? Are you not having fun? Talking about how aesthetics don't matter, but also long live aesthetics. Talking about mathematical literacy, and talking about the Doom versus Half-Life thing that Milan brought up, which I feel is has been on my mind for quite a while. But we'll do all that in part two. So, signing off, gentlemen.